Okay, when I say classroom test, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably a letter grade, right? A final score. But what if? What if we're looking at it all wrong? Today, we're going to explore how to transform assessment from just a final verdict into a powerful, real-time guide for learning.
Do you remember these things? I mean, before our phones just told us where to go, getting from A to B meant unfolding this giant, complicated piece of paper, trying to trace a route, and, let's be honest, a whole lot of hoping you were actually going the right way.
And that was the real problem, wasn't it? You could drive for miles feeling totally confident, only to discover you missed a crucial turn a half hour ago. That feeling of being lost and the huge delay in even realizing it, that's a really key idea here.
And, well, that brings us right back to the classroom. Think about a big final exam. Your students work for weeks, and then the test finally tells them, and you, how they did. But by then, the learning journey for that unit is over. It's way too late to go back and fix those wrong turns. So what if we just flipped the model completely? What if assessment wasn't a look back at a trip that's already finished, but more like a live, turn-by-turn guide? One that helps students navigate learning and reroutes them the instant they get off track. To really get this new approach, we first have to understand the old one, what we're calling the paper map model of assessment. Okay, this slide shows the crucial difference. On the left, you've got assessment of learning. Think final exams, final projects. It looks backward. Its job is to certify what's been learned. It's all about that final score. But over on the right, you have assessment for learning. This is a whole different ballgame. It looks forward. Its goal isn't to measure, but to drive learning. It's all about figuring out the very next step. So, let's talk about our GPS. This is what we call Assessment for Learning, or AFL for short, and it's a completely different way of thinking about how we check for understanding in the classroom. All right, so here's the more formal definition, and it comes from some groundbreaking work by researchers Black and William. The most important word here? Process. See, AFL isn't a single test you give. It's this continuous, ongoing loop of gathering evidence during a lesson and then using that info on the spot to adapt and improve. And this cycle, it works just like a GPS. First, you set the destination, making the learning goals super clear. Then, you constantly check your location by gathering little bits of evidence of understanding. Third, you analyze the route. Are the students on the right path? And finally, if they're not, you recalculate. You adapt your teaching right then and there. It's this constant responsive loop. Now, this isn't just some nice idea. It's actually backed by some really powerful theories about how people learn. So let's pop the hood and look at the engine that makes this GPS work. A researcher named D. Royce Sadler really gave us the core logic for this. He argued that for any student to improve, three things absolutely have to happen. First, they've got to know what good looks like. They need to see the destination. Second, they need to be able to look at their own work and see where it is in relation to that standard. They have to know where they are. And third, and this is the most important part, they need to know how to close that gap. This is the absolute essence of effective feedback.
Okay, so that's the theory. But what does this actually look like in a real busy classroom? Let's break it down into 5 key strategies that really bring this to life.
First things first, you got to make sure everyone in the car knows where you're all going. This means being crystal clear. Not just about what students are supposed to learn, but about what success is actually going to look like. Here's a perfect math example. Instead of just saying, "Today we're doing equations," the teacher gives them these clear "I can" statements. Now, the students have a literal checklist for success. They can actually see the destination, step by step. Next up, the GPS needs to constantly check its location, right? So teachers have to find clever ways to see what's really going on inside their students' heads during the lesson, not just waiting until the end. This is such a great hinge question. It's just a quick check, but it's at a critical point in the lesson. The answers students give will instantly tell the teacher if the class gets the core concept or if there's a big misconception getting in the way. It's like a moment of live data collection.
Okay, this one's huge. The key thing about feedback in this model is that it's not a grade. It's not a judgment. It is a recipe for improvement. It's the GPS saying, hey, in 200 feet, you're going to turn right.
You see how this feedback doesn't just say this is wrong. It pinpoints the exact gap, that missing link to the particle model, and then gives a clear, actionable instruction on how to fix it. That's not just feedback. You could call it feed forward. And finally, the ultimate goal here is to empower the students themselves. This means teaching them how to use those success criteria to give helpful feedback to their friends, and, critically, how to look at their own work, identify the gaps, and know what to do next. We're essentially turning them into the navigators of their own learning journey.
So why does all of this matter so much? What really happens when a classroom switches from using a paper map to using a GPS? Well, the impact is pretty incredible.
The research on this is really clear. This whole approach leads to better student achievement, period. It creates more equity because it's especially powerful for students who might be struggling. It helps teachers become more responsive and effective. And, it boosts student motivation by making them active owners of their own progress.
And the data absolutely backs this up. Big meta-analyses show that while, standard instruction has a decent effect, when you add this layer of assessment for learning and high-quality, forward-looking feedback, the positive effect on student learning becomes huge.
The evidence is just so compelling that it leads to this pretty powerful conclusion. Basically, teachers who really want to improve student learning simply cannot afford to ignore this. It's not just another strategy. It's fundamental to building a classroom where every single student can succeed.
So, I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. What if we completely reframed our view of assessment? What if its primary job wasn't to measure, rank, and sort, but to fuel the engine of learning itself, to give every student and every teacher their own personal GPS for the journey ahead?